Well, it's either welcome back or welcome to the first time for the second day of the DWC 2022 virtual conference. Hi, everyone. My name is Ingrid Palmer, and I am the Vice Chair of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, also the founder and CEO of Focus on Ability, and the Director of Agency Partnerships and Learning at Up With Women. And I'd like to introduce my co-host, Heather Walkus.
Hi, my name's Heather Walkus, and I'm proud to be the National Chair of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities. I also do a lot of work in community around guide dogs, service dogs, and around health and human rights and social justice work. Thank you. Go ahead, Ingrid.
Well, it is our pleasure to serve as your co-MCs for the Disability and Work in Canada 2022 virtual conference. And today I want to start off with recognition that no matter where we are joining from for this conference, that we are all on the traditional territories of Indigenous people. And that covers a lot a variety of different nations, and we want to recognize and honor them all. And in an act of reconciliation and truth, standing in solidarity with our Indigenous brethren, we want to use the space, the use of the land, we want to make sure that we are using the space and the land that we are on today to uplift those voices that have traditionally been unheard, recognition that Indigenous voices have historically been silenced and misrepresented, and that in our community, we also have experienced that type of misrepresentation and silencing. And today on this platform, we encourage everyone to support, give respect to voices that are speaking and bringing about perspectives and narratives of marginalized communities in the disability arena. And we want to use this space as a sign of solidarity and respect today. Thank you. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Ingrid. The overall goal of the conference is to identify ways to help implement the Pan-Canadian Strategy for Disability in Work, which was developed in consultation with stakeholders and persons with disabilities, the rights holders. As 2022 continues to be a challenging year, many ongoing challenges for the employment of persons with disabilities. The DWC conference is focused on how to meet these challenges and continues to make progress on the implementation of the Pan-Canadian Strategy for Disability in Work. The theme for this year's conference is disability, inclusion, and belonging in the Canadian workplace. The Disability and Work in Canada, DWC, initiative is a collaborative of multiple organizations. Founding organizations are the Center for Research on Work Disability Policy, CRWP, which is now the Inclusive Design for Employment Access, IDEA, Ontario Network of Injured Workers Group, ONIWG, and Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, CCRW. This past year, the DWC Committee has worked to expand representation of the disability community members' participation in the steering committee to include 4 new partner organizations, which are Inclusion Canada, Rick Hansen Foundation, Realize, and the Canadian National Institute of the Blind. A special thank you to the WC partner organizations for developing and organizing this conference. The members of the DWC Steering Committee are, in alphabetical order, Krista Carr, Executive Vice President, Inclusion Canada, Dorami Eiling, CEO of Rick Hansen Foundation, Alec Farquhar, Lead Engagement Inclusive Design for Employment Access at IDEA, Maureen Hahn, President and CEO of Canadian Council of Rehabilitation and Work, CCRW, Steve Mantis, the Chair of Research Action Committee, Ontario Network of Injured Workers Groups, ONIWG, Mahedo Sequoy, and I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. My screen reader said it that way, so it might not be true. Vice President, Research and International Affairs, and Chief Accessibility Officer at the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, CNIB. Emile Tomba, Executive Director, Inclusive Design for Employment Access, IDEA, and Director, Center for Research on Work Disability Policy, CRWDP. Tammy Yates-Rajaduray, Executive Director, Realize. On behalf of the Disability and Work in Canada Steering Committee, we also want to thank all the presenters for their time and expertise. Instead of giving all of you a thank you gift, we are making a donation to a pot of funding that will support people with disabilities to attend the WC in-person conference next year. Over to you, Ingrid.
Thank you, Heather. Yesterday was an incredible start to the conference. The theme of the day was disability in the workplace. And some of the highlights from the themes of yesterday's sessions were there was a powerful theme across numerous sessions on intersectionality, which we know, of course, is a really important perspective that we all must continue to dive in. Remote work is different from working at the office. If an employer is providing a special accommodation that requires more thought and needs to be specific to disability versus the flexibility of working from home, which many persons in the disability community learned through COVID. The theme of a sense of belonging emerged strongly as folks with long COVID-19 and those with chronic fatigue really expounded upon. Disclosure and navigating this with employers was another theme from the session on mild cognitive impairment in the workplace. Employers not feeling supported in finding ways to accommodate those who are hard of hearing or deaf was another theme that came up in understanding barriers to employment. We also learned how the unions are playing, the role that the unions are playing in supporting their members' accommodations and in understanding changing culture in the workplace, which are a few of the highlights from yesterday. We encourage everyone to visit the website after the conference to engage in the recordings of whatever sessions you weren't able to attend and perhaps missed. How did you find yesterday went, Heather?
Well, I think the information was very, very good. I think for myself, I would encourage for next year's conference that we adopt a no one left behind around use of language, of use of how the papers were presented in some of the circles and arrows and paragraphs and directions, and there was so much visual that wasn't discussed. So someone like me could not access what was coming up on the screen. Also, some of the language was very, you know, I'm a $10 to $25 word kind of gal, you know? So when I hear $75 words and $100 words, I disconnect. I feel separate and somehow less than. And so it feels demeaning to me when we're in a space that we are all finding grace with each other to learn and grow, that we also have to go past knowing it in our heads, but actualizing it. Let's truly start looking at changing how we do things so that we model how things can be done. And that isn't a a criticism, it is an invitation to look at who else is around. And again, centering people with disabilities, because we're the only ones in that Charter 15 that says people with disabilities. We want to always be centered, and that support people who are allies and are assisting us to get the data, to do the research, and to work with us, not on our behalf. What about you, Ingrid?
Well, I think the theme of disability in the workplace just really set a great tone and a building block to go upon for the rest of the conference. So moving on to the overview of day 2. Today's theme is inclusion in the workplace. And we have an important keynote by Jade, Pichette, Director of Programs, Pride at Work Canada, on ending accommodations and dreaming of an accessible future, as well as 2 sets of 4 parallel sessions today and 4 networking huddles. It's just going to be a really great day. There are also recorded vignettes to check out about the lived and living experiences of persons with disabilities under the vignette tab on the website, and short pre-recorded presentations available on demand under the pre-recorded tab on the conference website. And we encourage you to have a look. There is such a wealth of information and things there for you to check out. So we really encourage you to go on the website and get familiar with all of that. Heather?
Yeah. For common tech questions about navigating the conference website and for participating in the conference session, visit the FAQ page and also the participants guide located in the FAQ page. Maybe I'll let you talk about the accessibility features because I don't speak French and you do, Ingrid. So why don't you go ahead?
We are pleased to provide CART ASL interpretation for all of the live conference sessions and French to English interpretation for all keynotes and many of the parallel sessions. Captioning is available for clicking on the CC button or live transcript button and the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also view the live captioning by clicking on the stream text URL posted in the chat box. If you wish to view the caption on a separate screen outside of the Zoom platform, I might have read that wrong, I apologize, but there is some accessibility feature there that you can use. All pre-recorded presentations include captions or accessibility. The video of an ASL interpreter will be on your screen as your video layout in Zoom will already display the ASL interpretation side by side in side-by-side mode. You can also adjust the size of the screen with the ASL interpreter, placing your cursor on the bar between the 2 screens and dragging the bar side to side. In addition, for all keynotes and one of each set of parallel sessions, French to English interpretation is available. There will be a note in the program, des interprètes français à anglais seront disponibles. French to English interpreters will be available. In Zoom, select the French language channel by clicking on the interpretation icon at the bottom of the page of the screen and select French. You can also then hear the meeting audio translated into French by a live interpreter. Pour tous les keynotes et un de chaque ensemble de sessions parallèles, une interprétation français à anglais est disponible. Il y aura une note dans le programme. Des interprètes français à anglais seront disponibles. French to English interpreters will be available. Dans Zoom, sélectionnez le canal de langue française en cliquant sur l'icône Appuyer interprétation au bas de votre écran, puis sélectionnez français. Vous pourrez alors entendre l'audio de réunion traduite en français par un interprète en direct. Speakers were required. Speakers were requested to provide us with accessible material. And so that should have been done and will be published on the website, such as including alternative text and image, or providing them in Word text format. Can't hear you, Heather.
Sorry, if navigating the website is not accessible to you, you can send us an email to receive an alternate agenda in Word with links to join the conference sessions. Now, for all of you, here is the email: info@dwcstrategy.ca. Finally, we would like to request that you don't tweet about DWC in order to stand in solidarity with the Black, racialized, and disability community over the current concerns over management of Twitter. Guidance on how to join sessions and technical support. There is a chat box for technical support available at the bottom corner of the website for those having trouble accessing virtual sessions. Make sure you're logged in and joining the conference sessions. Go to the conference sessions page and click on the title of each session if you are interested in viewing. You can then join or watch by clicking the green "Click Here, Join View" button. Have you got all that memorized now? I pretty much do. This is day 2, second time I'm giving you this information. Note that this conference doesn't support Internet Explorer browser. Conference sessions will be recorded and available to the conference website for 3 months after the conference. To ask a question during live Q&As, type your question in the Q&A box or chat, and those features will be monitored and moderated. You may also raise your hand in Zoom, and the panelists will then unmute you, and you can ask your question. Ingrid?
Is it over to me?
Networking. In addition to our 4 networking huddles in the first 3 days of the conference, and then there's several first set of 4 sessions, and then the conference is also introducing 4 40-minute network sessions to start off on the 3rd day of the conference. To participate in the networking session, you can raise your hand by clicking raise hand in the webinar controls or message in the chat box, and we will change your role from attendee to a panelist. You can then turn on your video and unmute yourself, and you're also welcome to remain as an attendee and watch and listen to any network session. Are you ready for handover, Ingrid?
I am. The theme of today, as a reminder, is inclusion in the workplace. And please rejoin us next week on Wednesday, December 7th for day 3 of the conference, with the theme of the day being belonging in the workplace. The theme for the final day of the conference on Thursday, December 8th, will be inclusive workplace strategies. And we will now hand it over to DWC Steering Committee member Tammy Yates to introduce today's keynote speaker, Jade Pichette. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid and Heather. It's always a pleasure to listen to the both of you and to see the both of you. Thank you for your beautiful emceeing of the conference this year. Hello, bonjour et bon après-midi. It's so great to be with you all again this afternoon, and welcome to those joining the conference for the first time today. As Ingrid shared, my name is Tammy Yates-Rajaduray, and my preferred pronouns are she and her. I am the Executive Director of Realize, which hosts the Secretariat for the National Episodic Disabilities Forum. And I'm also a proud member of the National Steering Committee for the Disability and Work in Canada Conference. These folks are just fabulous to work with. Jade, thank you so much again for saying a resounding yes when we approached you to be our keynote speaker today on day 2 of the conference. Jade and I connected earlier on. It feels like it could have been earlier this year. It feels like it could have been last year with COVID. It could have been 5 years ago. Who knows? So the delegates don't hear too much from me and hear lots from you, Jade. Let me share a little bit about you and then hand over to you. So Jade, whose preferred pronouns are they and them, is an inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility professional based in Toronto, now known as Toronto. Currently, Jade serves as the Director of Programs at Pride at Work Canada, where they work with over 250 large employers across Turtle Island, now called Canada, around gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation inclusion. Jade has been named one of Future of Good's 2022 Young Impact Leaders and Toronto Metropolitan University's 2021 Pride Champions. In their spare time, they can be found geeking out over queer, trans, and Norse histories, disability justice, interfaith advocacy, firekeeping, and spending time with their chosen family. There is so much more that I can share about Jade, but I know who you really want to hear is Jade. There'll also be an opportunity to ask questions after their presentation. And now let's hear from Jade. Over to you, Jade.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for that absolutely warm welcome. I have been so honored and grateful to be asked to be with you all today. It means a lot as somebody who's been doing this work for quite a number of years as a queer person and as a trans person. Often we're not always welcome in many different spaces. And so being asked meant a lot. So thank you. Also, thank you to all the organizers today. A lot goes into putting on a conference like this. And you know, I've done many presentations and few have I come in and felt so just comfortable and welcome as this space, being with other disabled folks means a lot. So in terms of today, we're talking about this radical idea that I don't believe in accommodations. I believe in a future where there are no accommodations, where accommodations don't exist. And I know at a disability and work conference, this might be a bit of a radical idea, but it's one that I think we all agree with at the end of the day. So with any presentation I like to do, I do know that we had a long acknowledgement, but I would like to recognize that I'm a white settler of mostly Scottish, British, and culturally French Canadian descent, who was born on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, now known as Ottawa. However, I do, as mentioned, live, work, and play in Toronto, which is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. And these lands and waters have been the traditional homes and territories of and cared for by the Anishinaabe, Wendat, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, Toronto is home to Indigenous, Afro-Indigenous, and urban Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. And I also want to recognize that Toronto has other historical communities that have had legacies of colonialism and racism labeled against them, including African, Black, and historically enslaved communities, and Chinese communities who were especially affected by the head tax and the forcible removal from the ward. So for those who don't know, Toronto City Hall, where it currently sits, used to be the home of those who escaped through the Underground Railroad, as well as a very large Chinese community that was forcibly evicted and led to the first community housing in Canada, perhaps, but only for the white residents of that neighborhood, and everybody else was displaced. So just a little bit of history for you. As a white person living in the city, I think it's important to recognize that in all the work that I do. So I talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. That's my job. That's what I do on a daily basis. And so really diversity, we're asking, who's in the room? Equity, we're talking about, are they provided different ways into the room? And inclusion, we're asking, are they welcome in the room? But when we ask about accommodation, we're really asking at the end of the day, how can people ask to stay in the room? I apologize, I'm just also getting the comments out so I can see the chat as we go through. So within the screen here is just a infographic with the text that I just mentioned. Diversity, equity, and inclusion recognize different people are in a room and provide different ways into the room and welcome them into the room. But it really doesn't address who designed the room, who built the room, who decorated the room, who gets to pick the music, who gets to pick the food, who gets to pick the wall color. All of these pieces go into actually creating a welcoming and inclusive and accessible space that I feel like diversity, equity, inclusion no longer serves. And so instead of talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accommodation, I like to talk about dignity, justice, belonging, and accessibility. And so this has been inspired by Ada Miriam Davis of Decolonized Design, whose article, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Have Failed. How about belonging, dignity, and justice instead? Really touched me quite deeply. And so dignity instead of diversity says, how do we honor who is inside and outside the room? Justice, instead of talking about equity, talks about how do we address historic barriers into the room? How do we address those historic harms? And belonging, instead of inclusion, asks, do people feel welcome in the room? So not, are they welcome to be in the room, but are we actually feeling welcome in the room? And accessibility, instead of accommodation, says, of course, how can the room be as easy to access for all? And again, this is another infographic just with the text that I have mentioned. So I can talk at length, but I feel like I'm just one piece of the third, fourth, maybe fifth generation of disability justice. And really, I am so grateful for those who came before me and who continue to do amazing work, who are queer, disabled, amazing activists, educators, and I've included their quotes here. So the first, there is a photo of Angela Davis, and the quote is, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." So accommodation says, let's find a way to make this space work for this individual. But that says that the structure itself is still lacking. That says that what we're going into, what we are part of, is still lacking. And so we really need to look at how do we change the structure in and of itself. And so accommodations are reactive. They're something that are asked for. And they're based in this idea of legal compliance. And any equity deserving group, probably the majority of us on this call, know that compliance and the law is important. It's important, don't get me wrong, but it is not effective for a lot of us. The reality is not that the law has lifted all of us out of poverty or into spaces that are safe, that are welcoming. It is us who have created those spaces for ourselves that has really made that change. And so instead of accommodations, if we start from this idea of accessibility from the first, which is a mental shift for some people. For those of us who are doing disability work, maybe this is not a shift. This is just how we think already. But for many, this is a shift in workplaces who are in human resources, who are in diversity, equity, inclusion. This idea of starting with this idea of accessibility, i.e., instead of being reactive with accommodations, we're being proactive. We're creating inclusive spaces from the get-go. Instead of it being something that has to be asked for, it's thought of. Instead of it being based in compliance, it's based in justice. So we really think about, how do we create the space? How do we make everybody feel welcome here? How do we create that sense of belonging? And that is work. That is a lot of work, but it is also a mental shift from, how are we going to get this person to be okay, to how about the people who haven't even been able to get in the room? And how are we going to change the room so that's not the case? And they feel like they have a stake in that change. And here is a queer Asian woman who is looking down, being Mia Mingus. Mia Mingus noted, you cannot end or fight ableism without also ending and fighting all other forms of oppression and violence. Disabled people are part of every community, and it's impossible and harmful to separate disability from our fight for liberation. This was posted to Twitter in 2020. One of the reasons I included this was because what I end up seeing is that many of us are doing our own fights for liberation. We're doing our fight for addressing queerphobia or transphobia or a certain form of ableism. But often we're not recognizing within our own communities that there are things that we need to do. We need to step up when it comes to anti-racism. We need to step up when it comes to anti-indigeneity. We need to step up when it comes to all of these different pieces of addressing historical and current harms. And the only way that we do that is by coming together. So the modern or contemporary disability justice movement was really formed by a number of really amazing activists, including Mia Mingus, and also Leah Lakshmi Pepsana Samarasina, who is the author of Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, as well as The Future is Disabled, Dirty River, and many other really amazing books. And they're pictured here. Leah uses they, she pronouns. They're pictured here wearing a shirt that says, I am my wildest dreams. And they have a cane and are standing in a alleyway with blue and gray hair. And they noted, disability justice means we are not left behind. We are beloved, kindred, needed. So when we move from a rights-based model to a justice-based model, that says from the beginning that we are valid as disabled people. We matter. Not only do we matter, but we're needed. The amount of awareness that is brought to workplaces because we as disabled people exist, because we bring things forward, because we are in those spaces, is a gift. and it's powerful, and it's something that creates space for others who may not even have a disability, or maybe will have one day down the road. But that being said, we are leaving people behind. And so I've thrown in a quote here. I apologize, it was from Twitter, but I think it's important to showcase this. So this post was made 2 days ago by a disabled Ontarian who stated, "This will be my final post. I cannot go on living this way. MAID is the only help offered. I'm on ODSP, and I was just approved for MAID for the second time, and I'm following through with it. I wish all of you the best and truly hope change comes for ODSP. I cannot wait that long." This is heartbreaking, and I'm sure this is probably impacting people who are reading this, but also for those of us who are doing this work, this isn't a surprise. They made one more post and it was goodbye. None of us have been able to get a hold of this person, and they are a 25-year-old who became disabled due to a workplace accident. I apologize for not describing the ODSP being the Ontario Disability Support Program and MAID being medical assistance in dying. So we are seeing many more people these days who are accessing medical assistance in dying because they don't have access to stable housing and living situations. So even though we're talking about workplaces, the people who support other disabled people, many of us are also disabled. And so even those of us who are in workplaces who are able to keep work for whatever reason, whether it's privilege, luck, connections, skill, whatever that might be, those come from our ability to support one another. And often, I know for myself, I'm supporting people in my family who are also disabled. And it's really important that we recognize that we are leaving people behind inside and outside of work, and that the only way that we can change things is by doing it together. So one of the things that we can do, and I know there's many really amazing disabled activists in this room right now. As somebody who is also disabled, is proudly autistic, neurodiverse, chronically ill, I want to follow what Elle said. So Elle is a white trans man who uses he, him pronouns, and is also one of the founders of the disability justice movement. And in Exile and Pride, Disability, Queerness, and Liberation, he stated, "I want to sharpen my pride on what strengthens me, my witness on what haunts me. Whatever we name ourselves, however we end up shattering our self-hatred, shame, silence, and isolation, the goal is the same, to end our daily material oppression." It's only by us embracing ourselves do we find and create a sense of justice for others. It's only by creating that space and showing ourselves and showing our true selves that we create space for others, and that we show up in ways that creates opportunities for those in future. Devin Price, who is a transmasculine non-binary person who's currently wearing a floral shirt and is white and is smiling in this photo, notes in Unmasking Autism, Discovering the New Faces of Neurodiversity, refusing to perform neurotypicality is a revolutionary act of disability justice. It's also a radical act of self-love. When I was talking to my chosen family, practicing this yesterday, the things I talked about was about how you stop hiding a cane, and those moments when you actually show the stim toy that you have off screen. the moments where you say, yes, I'll take the chair. I'll take that wheelchair. Those moments are still revolutionary acts. They're moments of self-love, and they're moments that create space. And it's scary to take those moments sometimes, but it's powerful. So to close out the keynote today, and then we will have some Q&A, I wanted to mention Marsha P. Johnson's quote. And Marsha was, I should say, a legendary Black trans woman activist based in New York City, who was a sex worker, was one of the founders of some of the first trans groups in New York, as well as gay liberation groups. And she noted, and was disabled as well, she noted, no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. So in our work, I encourage people to think about, how do we come together across identity to build that change, whether that's disabled or abled, deaf or hearing, autistic or allistic, neurodiverse or neurotypical, mad or not, blind or seeing. No matter what, our disability, if we don't have a disability, our racial background, our sexuality, our gender, our class, we really always need to be thinking about, what about the other? What about somebody else who has those marginalizations that we don't? You know, as an autistic trans femme who is disabled, who grew up poor, I certainly have had some impacts and experiences, but I'm also white. I'm also a settler. I also now have a degree and a well-paying job where I'm able to be myself and get paid for it. Those are all major privileges, and they're ones that I don't take lightly. So as we work through the days, I encourage people to take those moments to reflect and say, how can I support somebody else who works in my field or another? And what is that? That true solidarity at the end of the day is an act of love. So on that note, I will close the formal piece, and I'm very grateful that all of you were here. Please feel free to check out my podcast. I am that person now. I will share it in the links afterwards. And please feel free to reach out to me at any time via email. We are here for each other.
Jade, how do I even begin to say thank you? What an incredible sharing and presentation. But I am going to say thank you. Thank you so much. You really not only tug at our heartstrings, but really it was a call to action with love. And you can see from the comments and even in the question and answer section, how impactful your sharing has been and how very interrelated with work it is around that place of lack that you spoke about, and changing the structure. And of course, we all know that these structures are not just physical, they are attitudinal and otherwise. And the point that you made about accommodations being reactive and the layers of oppression that we all not only face, but implement, and the harms that they cause as well. So we're seeing in the chat, what an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. Great presentation. In the Q&A, again, thank you, Jade. I have been having this conversation in another very large, important forum, how we can move from discussing accommodation to accessibility. And you've provided the words that this person that was missing. So thank you. To ask a question, please include it in the chat or include it in the Q&A section, but you can also continue to share your comments. Another comment is, as you know, as tears welled up in my throat, you are bringing a tear to my eye with this. This person's mother taught them as a child to forgive and teach others about disability, and they've lived that for 60 years. And it's been a journey. Someone has commented on Canada having the highest rates of medical assistance in dying. And as you shared that, Jade, I recall as well an article that I saw in the newspapers about someone living with long COVID. I think it could be 3 to 4 months ago, who has started that process again because of the lack of supports. Yes, we need to step up by coming together. We have a question. How, as a manager, can I let new employees and candidates know that they're welcome and safe to be authentic if they belong to the 2S LGBTQ+ community?
Thank you for all that summary, Tammy, and to those who commented. I see your comments. I feel you. I'm with you. I'm grateful. In terms of the question in regards to 2S LGBTQIA+ inclusion, part of it is the bigger picture, is the policies and procedures of the organization. That's the biggest thing. Is there a trans inclusion policy? Are there benefits for queer and trans employees? You know, those kind of structural pieces. But that being said, as an individual, sometimes you don't have that power and ability. And so the first thing is showcasing in different ways that you are welcoming. And one of those is educate yourself, which you're doing right now. So good job. Second is to look at situations where you can intervene. And if you see situations of harm, another is to advocate for those systemic changes. But then there's the micro pieces of adding pronouns next to your name on Zoom, like Tammy has done beside me. You know, it could be the small things of introducing yourself with your pronouns, having a rainbow flag at your desk or office that these new candidates can see. You know, it's these small things that build up over time and create that space. There's also been a question about trans policies. So A, you could work with us, Pride at Work Canada, but B, as an easier access is the 519 has a guide called Creating Authentic Spaces that runs you through how to create trans-inclusive workplaces, including policies. And it's available in English, French, and Spanish. And my understanding is that it was made screen reader available. I don't have a screen reader, so I apologize that I haven't tested that myself. However, my understanding is that it is. So that's where I would go.
Great, thanks so much, Jade. And we want to say thanks. We want to say thank you again. Yes, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. And we also want to call everyone in to really, move forward in that act of solidarity and that act of love that
Yes.
Jade shared. So we look forward to all of you contacting Jade at Pride at Work Canada. Maybe after the holidays, Jade needs a break. So thank
I'm not
you
getting
so
one
much
for a little bit, but
for
thank
a
you.
while. But that's a good thing, Jade. Thank you so much again, everyone. Please do to have a look at the vignettes that we have available. Take a 5-minute wellness break and join us for one of the parallel sessions that are coming up. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much, everyone. And thanks again, Jade, Heather, and Ingrid.